Hello there to all of you people up there in Durham. My name's Tom. I'm the chaplain of Exeter School, and Father Simon and I go back to our days when we were training for the priesthood at Ripon College, Cuddesdon. And he's asked me to give a reflection for you today, and I thought I would talk to you a little bit about this book that I read over the summer. It's called Humankind, A Hopeful History by Rutger Bregman, and I really recommend it as a great read and a very hopeful read, and a good thing to be thinking about in this time which is ongoing and difficult for us all. And at the start of the book, Rutger Bregman asks us a question. He says, what kind of planet do we live on? Do we live on planet A or on planet B? And he asks us to imagine this scenario whereby an aeroplane has to make an emergency landing. And it breaks into three parts as it does so. And as the cabin fills with smoke, everyone inside realizes we need to get out of this plane quickly if we're going to stay alive. And Rutger Bregman asks us to consider two different scenarios as to what happens next. So he says, on planet A, the passengers turn to their neighbours, want to check if they're okay, and those who are needing assistance are helped out of the plane first, and people are willing to give their lives even for perfect strangers. On planet B, something very different happens. On planet B, everyone is left to fend for themselves. There's total panic breaking out. There's lots of pushing and shoving, and children, the elderly, and those with disabilities get trampled underfoot. Now, the question that this book asks is, which of those two planets do we live on? Do we live on planet A or planet B? I want you to have a think for a moment. Which of those two planets do you think we live on? Well, a professor of social psychology in the Netherlands asked his classes this question over and over again over a course of many years. And he found that about 3% of people think we live on planet A, and 97% of people think we live on planet B. In other words, most people think that in a crisis situation, the bad side of human nature would come out and people would be seen for being bad and selfish and panicking and trying to look after themselves. In the 1980s, the World Values Survey asked this question. Generally speaking, would you say that most people can be trusted, or that you need to be very careful in your dealings with people? And the answer most people gave was, no, people can't be trusted. We need to be careful in our dealings with people. What's really interesting, and this book, Humankind, makes this point really well, is that actually, when we look at real life disaster scenarios, what we find is that people are much more positive. They're much more like those on planet A than on planet B. I just want to give you two examples from history. The first is the sinking of the Titanic. Now, if you watch Titanic, the movie, you'd think that as the boat was going down, there was total chaos and there was complete panic and people were pushing and shoving each other. Actually, eyewitness accounts suggest it was very different. One eyewitness wrote this: there was no indication of panic or hysteria. There were no cries of fear. There was no running to or fro. So perhaps the reality was more like planet A. And then a different example from more recent years, the attacks on the World Trade Center in 2001 on September the 11th. If you don't know about that event, terrorists flew planes into the World Trade Center and the buildings eventually collapsed, but people were trying to get out of the buildings to safety. Now, you would think, of course, that that was an awful thing for people to be going through, and that there would be panic and people would be pushing and shoving each other out of the way. Actually, what happened in real life, thousands of people descended those stairs calmly, even though they knew that their lives were in danger. They would step aside for those who needed most help and for firefighters. One eyewitness wrote this. He said, "I couldn't believe it. At that point, people were saying, no, you first." So if actually human nature is a bit better than we think it is, why are we so negative? Why do we think that things are worse than they are? And this is because of something called the negativity bias, which means that we're more attuned to bad things in the world than we are to good things. It's hardwired into us from an evolutionary point of view. Better in our prehistory, thousands and thousands of years ago, to have run away from a saber-toothed tiger 100 times than it was to be eaten once. And so we're more likely to notice bad things. And you can probably recognise that for yourself. If you have an ordinary day, and lots of good things happen, but a couple of bad things happen, you're more likely to notice and remember the bad thing at the end of the day. And of course our news feeds this as well. Why? Because bad news sells better than good news. And so we're more predisposed to think about the bad things than we are about the good things. What I want to suggest, though, of course, is that actually human nature is much better. And this is something we find in all of the major religions of the world. In Hinduism, the traditional greeting is said like this, Namaste. And Namaste means I'm bowing to the divine in you. It's saying that each person has got an aspect of God inside them. I'm bowing to the divine in you, that good core of humanity. And we see this too in the Christian religion. In the Bible, it says humankind is made in the image of God. And so all of us bear the stamp of God inside us. The core of each human being is good. The Dalai Lama, the leader of Tibetan Buddhists, said this: a deep awareness of the goodness of human beings, that they are essentially kind, helpful and gentle, can give us courage and hope. And I hope that you feel encouraged by that actually perhaps the person sitting next to you in the classroom at the moment, perhaps the person you meet on the bus is actually good at their core. We all are good at our core. And of course, I'm not saying that there is no such a thing as evil in the world, that there isn't also a darker side of human nature, but actually the good side is at our core, and that's the side we need to grow in more and more. So, greetings to you in Durham from here in Exeter School Chapel, and I wish you all the very best. Namaste.